the Royal Commission into the banking financial sectors that ran throughout last year and produced its final recommendations back in February of this year, really game-changing in terms of that sector and in terms of the political response as well. In fact, just yesterday, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg detailed his roadmap to finally implement all of the, well, most of the recommendations, those that the government's adopting anyway. There are a couple that's not. We'll come back to those. Anyway, the reforms will all be done, at least introduced by the end of next year, or so we're told. Well, a number of books have been written about that Royal Commission. The one you need to get is this one from my colleague Annelise Nielsen, Money Spinners. And look, the front cover cuts to the chase. How Australians were fed lies, sold spin and charged money for nothing by banks and financial advisors. Annelise, congratulations on the book. It's very exciting and a terrific read. Look, I've got to start by asking, why did you want to write a book about all of this?
Well, look, originally I didn't. It never really occurred to me. I knew that when the Royal Commission was happening, everyone knew Adele Ferguson would write a book. She was the one that started the thing and she was going to write the tome. But I was approached by a publisher. At the time, there was that frenzy of, oh, everyone's writing books about it. And I just said, oh, no way, no way, no way. And then it was after the interim report was handed down and I did the segment with you afterwards going through it. And it was just so obvious that financial advice really stuck out as this weird 2 weeks where this whole industry came crashing down that I'd never heard of. And I literally walked out of the studio and called the publisher, and I was like, "That's
is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. We can share some credit for this." But you really focused on that financial advice aspect of this. Why is that? Because you've really dug into a bit of the history of financial advice in Australia, and obviously uncovered some pretty eye-opening stories that emerged at the Royal Commission.
It was just fascinating to me. I'm a millennial. Like, we're not big savers. No one I knew used a financial planner, and it was this whole industry that a certain generation's really quite obsessed with. It had these horrific stories about just complete misconduct, greed, theft. And what really struck me was just, it was the first time that this Banking Royal Commission became a punter story. The first round, consumer advice, the consumer affairs round, had stuff about people handing around bribes full of envelopes of cash and bank accounts, and no one really cared. But as soon as you've got someone at the Commonwealth Bank charging a customer fee for advice who died, it just became this huge story.
Was that what struck you as the most egregious example to emerge at the Royal Commission?
Funnily enough, no. And that's the example that a lot of financial advisors get really hung up on, because it was really negligible amount. That case was someone whose their money was being managed by trustees, so it was a very complicated case, and it was just kind of that apathy. It's the one that advisors really get the most annoyed about, because they're like, look, it could happen to anyone. It's pretty bad. It's not like you're charging advice a fee for anything. It's literally you're supposed to have sat across from someone and told them to do something.
So what really struck you then?
I still think the worst round was the Indigenous round. Just the absolute targeted exploitation of the most vulnerable people who have nothing. And it exploited their lack of financial savvy. It exploited the ingrained poverty that some of these communities were facing, and it exploited their cultural sensitivities about how important especially funeral plans are for Indigenous culture. And so that just, to me, it was just horrific, and it was amazing how little coverage it got. Like, I was lucky Sky flew me up to cover it, but not everyone did. And the farmer stuff as well, the same thing. It just didn't seem to get the same traction. I don't know if everyone was fatigued by that point, by just more misconduct. Oh, God, what else have bankers done now? But
you could really see, following it every day, how some sectors, vulnerable sectors, farmers, Indigenous Australians, were really exploited. Do you think, I mean, there has been change, no doubt, since all of this came to light. Banks have largely got out of the financial advice business themselves. Do you think there has been substantial change or enough change?
The big thing is going to be the banks getting out of it. That is huge, because they were just really driving that poor culture where people who just weren't really thinking about it were punching in, punching out and just doing really bad stuff. But the thing that I think will make sure that this doesn't keep happening is the fact that it just wasn't that profitable for the banks to begin with, and they're there to make money, which is great. Capitalist society, all the power to them. But it's going to be those middle operators, the ones where we really saw a lot of lives get destroyed. Like, I interviewed Terry McMaster, who's the one who collapsed in the stand, and Sam Henderson. They both lost everything. And I was just really interested in the human side of what they experienced as well, because they're people too. And a lot of people who are in financial advice are really quite altruistic. They think they can help people, and they just don't see the bigger picture about how it could be impacting people, and they don't see that just because things go wrong doesn't mean it's their fault. And it's never black and white. And the thing is, people really want financial advice, and so the industry's not going away. But especially with these reforms coming through from the government, there's nothing that's going to be changing everything.
Well, just on that, I mean, there's a lot of politics, obviously, in how fast it's acting or how slow the government's acting and so on. I mean, do you think there's anything that hasn't happened yet that urgently needs to happen when it comes to financial advice? Look,
I know it's not a popular opinion, but I reckon the government's kind of doing the right thing. You can't just change these industries overnight. It was seismic, the impact of the Royal Commission and the impact it's had on business as it is. I think it's a fair few to call it fast tracking. You can't give yourself an artificially long timeline and go, oh wait, but we'll beat it.
Fast tracking.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to take people with you. You can't because people will lose their livelihoods. There's a lot of flow-on effects, but they do need to crack down on a lot of this stuff. And it does seem like, I don't know, I'm too optimistic. I know Janine Perrott gives me a hard time all the time because she says, I've seen this before. It's never changed. I think it will be better. But the test will be in the next few years, and the test is going to be on the regulators. That's the key. We've seen that they've said there's going to be 20 new cases prosecuted, but at least the prosecutions begin by the end of the year. If that happens, that's going to be a big deal.
Look, I need to ask you about squeezing this in, because you didn't just cover the Royal Commission of the banks. You were out on the road covering the lengthy election campaign as well, and I know you were hammering out this book throughout all of that. I don't know how you did it.
Well, to be fair, I got the first draft of the transcript done before the campaign started. That was my big thing. I said, I can't be doing this on the bus. But one fed the other. It really helped, in the process of doing it. And I'd be going to Sydney a lot and interviewing people. I ended up meeting a lot of people that had worked with Scott Morrison. So that ended up giving me a lot of good context. But yeah, I just didn't sleep a lot for a few months. So.
Well done. I mean, congratulations. It is an enormous undertaking to write a book, particularly amongst everything else that you're doing, and a terrific read. Money Spinners, out from today. Go and grab a copy. Annelise Nielsen, well done and thank you.
Thank you.